And it was at that time in the year, which is the year of Joseph's going down to Mitzrayim after his brothers had sold him, that Reuven, the son of Yaakov, went to Timnah and took unto him for a woman Eliahuram, the daughter of Avi, and the Canaanite, and he came to her. And Eliahuram, the woman of Reuven, conceived and bore Hanok, Palu, Ketzron, Carmi, 4 sons, and Shimon, his brother, took his sister Dinah for a woman, and she bore unto him Yemuel, Yamian, Ohad, Akim, and Tessachar, 5 sons. And he afterward came to Bunah, the Canaanite woman, the same is Bunah, whom Shimon took captive from the city of Shechem. And Bunah was before Dinah, and attended upon her. And Shimon came to her, and she bore unto him Shual. Yehudah went at that time to Adullam, and he came to a man of Adullam, and his name was Ki-ira. And Yehudah saw there the daughter of a man from Canaan, and her name was Aliyah, the daughter of Shua, and he took her and came to her. And Eliab bore unto Yehudah Onan, and Shiloh, 3 sons. And Levi and Issachar went to the land of the east, and they took unto themselves for women the daughters of Yovav, the son of Yoktan, the son of Eber, and Yovav, the son of Yoktan, and 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Adiah, and the name of the younger was Ariada. And Levi took Adianah, and Issachar took Ariada, and they came to the land of Canaan to their father's house. And Adianah bore unto Levi Gershon, Kohath, Merari, 3 sons. And Ariada bore unto Issachar Tola, Pula, Yov, and Shimron, 4 sons. And Dan went to the land of Moab, and took for a woman Al-Laaleth, the daughter of Kemudan, the Moavi, and he brought her to the land of Canaan. And Aplaleth was barren, she had no offspring. And Elohim afterward remembered Alaleth, the woman of Dan, and she conceived and bore a son. And she called his name Cushim. And Gad and Naphtali went to Haran, and took from thence the daughters of Amram, the sons of Uz, the son of Nachor, for women. And these are the names of the daughters of Amram. The name of the elder was Miriamah, and the name of the younger Uzeth. And Naphtali took Miriamah, and Gad took Uzeth, and brought them to the land of Canaan, to their father's house. And Miriamah bore unto Naphtali Yaktisael, Gani, Yester, and Shalem for sons. And Uzeth bore unto Gad Tisiphion, Kagi, Shuni, Etzban, Arai, Arvadii, and Eli, 7 sons. And Asher went forth and took Adam, the daughter of Avlah, and the son of Hadad, and the son of Ishmael, for a woman, and he brought her to the land of Canaan. And Adam, the woman of Asher, died in those days. She had no offspring. And it was after the death of Adam that Asher went to the other side of the river, and took for a woman Hadarah, the daughter of Evimael, the son of Eber, the son of Shem. And the young woman was of comely appearance, and a woman of sense, and she had been the woman of Melchiel, the son of Elam, the son of Shem. And Hadarah bore a daughter unto Melchiel, and he called her name Sirach. And Melchiel died after this, and Hadarah went and remained in her father's house. And after the death of the woman of Asher, he went and took Hadarah for a woman, and brought her to the land of Canaan. Sarah, her daughter, he also brought with them, and she was 3 years old, and the damsel was brought up in Yaakov's house. And the damsel was of a comely appearance, and she went in the sanctified ways of the children of Yaakov. She lacked nothing, and Yahweh gave her wisdom and understanding. And Hadurah, the woman of Asher, conceived, and bore unto him Yimnah, Yishva, Yeshvi, and Beriah, 4 sons. And Zebulun went to Midian, and took for a woman Mariashah, the daughter of Molad, the son of Aviada, the son of Midian, and brought her to the land of Canaan. And Meroshash bore unto Zebulun Kered, Elon, and Yachiel, 3 sons. And Yaakov sent to Aram, the son of Tesubah, the son of Terach, and he took for his son Benjamin, Michael, the daughter of Aram, and she came to the land of Canaan, to the house of Yaakov. And Benjamin was 10 years old when he took Mechaalah, the daughter of Aram, for a woman. And Mechaalah conceived and bore Benjamin, Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, and Naaman, 5 sons. And Benjamin went afterwards and took a woman of Arabah, the daughter of Shimron, the son of Abraham, in addition to his first woman, and he was 18 years old. And Arabah bore unto Benjamin Rosh, Ruash, Mapim, Kupim, and Ard, 5 sons. And in those days Yehudah went to the house of Shem, and took Tamar, the daughter of Elam, the son of Shem, for a woman for his firstborn Er. And Er came to his woman Tamar, and she became his woman. And when he came to her, he outwardly destroyed his seed, and his works were evil in the sight of Yahweh, and Yahweh slew him. And it was after the death of Yehudah's firstborn, that Yehudah said unto Onan, Go to your brother's woman, and marry her as the next of kin, and raise up seed to your brother. And Onan took Tamar for a woman, and he came to her. And Onan also did like to the work of his brother, and his work was evil in the sight of Yahweh, and he slew him also. And when Onan died, Yehudah said to Tamar, Remain in your father's house until my son Shiloh shall have grown up. And Yehudah did no more delight in Tamar to give her to Shiloh, for he said, Perchance he will also die like his brothers. And Tamar rose up and went and remained in her father's house. And Tamar was in her father's house for some time. And at the revolution of the year, Eliath, the woman of Yehudah, died, and Yehudah was comforted for his woman. And after the death of Eliath, Yehudah went up with his friend Chirah to Timnah to shear the sheep. And Tamar heard that Yehudah had gone up to Timnah to shear the sheep, and that Shiloh was grown up, and Yehudah did not delight in her. And Tamar rose up and put off the garments of her widowhood, and she put a veil upon her, and she entirely covered herself. And she went and sat in the public thoroughfare, which was upon the road to Timnah. And Yehuda passed and saw her, and took her, and came to her, and she conceived by him. And at the time of being delivered, behold, there were twins in her womb. And he called the name of the first Perez, and the name of the second Zerah. In those days, Joseph was still confined in the prison house in the land of Mitzrayim. At that time, the attendants of Pharaoh were standing before him, the chief of the butlers and the chief of the bakers, which belonged to the king of Mitzrayim. And the butler took wine and placed it before the king to drink, and the baker placed bread before the king to eat. And the king drank of the wine and ate of the bread, he and his servants and ministers that ate at the king's table. And while they were eating and drinking, the butler and the baker remained there, and Pharaoh's ministers found many flies in the wine which the butler had brought, and stones of nitre were found in the baker's bread. And the captain of the guard placed Joseph as an attendant on the Pharaoh's officers. And Pharaoh's officers were in confinement 1 year. And at the end of the year, they both dreamed dreams in one night, and in the place of confinement where they were. And in the morning, Joseph came to them to attend upon them as usual. And he saw them, and behold, their countenances were dejected and sad. And Joseph asked them, why are your countenances sad and dejected this day? And they said unto him, we dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. And Joseph said unto them, relate, I pray you, your dream unto me, and Elohim shall give you an answer of peace, as you desire. And the butler related his dream unto Joseph, and he said, I saw in my dream, and behold, a large vine was before me. And upon that vine I saw 3 branches, and the vine speedily blossomed and reached a great height, and its clusters were ripened, and it became grapes. And I took the grapes and pressed them into a cup and placed it in Pharaoh's hand, and he drank. And Joseph said unto him, the 3 branches that were upon the vine are 3 days. Yet within 3 days, the king will order you to be brought out, and he will restore you to your office. And you shall give the king his wine to drink, as at first when you were his butler. But let me find favor in your sight, that you shall remember me to Pharaoh when he will be well with you, and do kindness unto me, and get me brought forth from this prison. For I was stolen away from the land of Canaan, and I was sold for a slave in this place. And also that which was told you concerning my master's woman is false, for they placed me in this dungeon for naught. And the butler answered Joseph, saying, if the king deal well with me as at first, as you last interpreted to me, I will do all that you desire and get you brought out of this dungeon. And the baker, seeing that Joseph had accurately interpreted the butler's dream, also approached and related the whole of his dream to Joseph. And he said unto him, in my dream I saw, and behold, 3 white baskets upon my head. And I looked, and behold, there were in the uppermost basket all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh. And behold, the birds were eating them from my head. And Joseph said unto him, the 3 baskets which you did see are 3 days. Yet within 3 days Pharaoh will take off your head and hang you upon a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from off you, as you saw in your dream. In those days the queen was about to be delivered, and upon the day she bore a son unto the king of Mitzrayim. And they proclaimed that the king had gotten his firstborn son, and all the people of Mitzrayim, together with the officers and servants of the Pharaoh, rejoiced greatly. And upon the 3rd day of his birth, Pharaoh made a feast for his officers and servants, for the host of the land of Tesar, and of the land of Mitzrayim, And all the people of Mitzrayim and the servants of Pharaoh came to eat and drink with the king of the feast of his son, and to rejoice at the king's rejoicing. And all of the officers of the king and his servants were rejoicing at that time for 8 days at the feast. And they made merry with all sorts of musical instruments, with timbrels and with dances in the king's house for 8 days. And the butler, to whom Joseph had intercepted his dream, forgot Joseph, or interpreted his dream, forgot Joseph, and he did not mention him to the king as he had promised, for this thing was from Yahweh in order to punish Joseph, because he had trusted in man. And Joseph remained after this in the prison house 2 years until he had completed 12 years. And Yitzchak, the son of Abraham, was still living in those days in the land of Canaan, and he was very aged, 180 years old. And Esau, his son, the brother of Yaakov, was in the land of Edom, and he and his sons had possessions in it amongst the children of Seir. And Esau heard that his father's time was drawing nigh to die, and he and his sons and household came into the land of Canaan unto his father's house. And Yaakov and his sons went forth from the place where they dwelt in Hebron, and they all came to their father Yitzchak. And they found Esau and his sons in the tent. And Yaakov and his sons sat before his father Yitzchak. And Yaakov was still mourning for his son Joseph. And Yitzchak said unto Yaakov, Bring me hither your sons, and I will bless them. And Yaakov brought his 11 children before father Yitzchak. And Yitzchak placed his hands upon all the sons of Yaakov. And he took hold of them and embraced them and kissed them one by one. And Yitzchak blessed them on that day. And he said unto them, May the Elohim of your fathers bless you and increase your seed like the stars of heaven for number. And Yitzchak also blessed the sons of Esau, saying, May Elohim cause you to be a dread and a terror to all that behold you, and to all your enemies. And Yitzchak called Yaakov and his sons, and they all came and sat before Yitzchak. And Yitzchak said to Yaakov, Yahweh Elohim of the whole earth said unto me, Unto your seed will I give this land for an inheritance, if your children guard my statutes and my ways. And I will perform unto them the oath which I swore unto your father Abraham. Now therefore, my son, teach your children and your children's children to fear Yahweh, and to go the good way, which will please Yahweh Eloheka. For if you guard the ways of Yahweh and his statutes, Yahweh will also guard you, his covenant with Abraham, and will do well with you and your seed in all the days. And when Yitzchak had finished commanding Yaakov and his children, he gave up his ruach and died, and was gathered unto his people. And Yaakov and Esau fell upon the face of their father Yitzchak, and they wept. And Yitzchak was 180 years old when he died in the land of Canaan and in Hebron. And his sons carried him to the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham had bought from the children of Heth, for a possession of a burial place. And all the kings of the land of Canaan went up with Yaakov and Esau to bury Yitzchak. And all the kings of Canaan showed Yitzchak great honor at his death. And the sons of Yaakov and the sons of Esau went barefooted about, walking and lamenting until they reached Kiryat Arba. And Yaakov and Esau buried their father Yitzchak in the cave of Machpelah, which is Kiryat Arba in Hebron, and they buried him with great honor, as at the funeral of kings. And Yaakov and his sons, and Esau and his sons, and all the kings of Canaan made a great and heavy mourning, and they buried him and mourned for him many days. And at the death of Yitzchak, he left his cattle and his possessions, and all belonging to him, to his sons. And Esau said unto Yaakov, Behold, I pray you, all that our father has left, we will divide it into 2 parts, and I will have the choice. And Yaakov said, We will do so. And Yaakov took all that Yitzchak had left in the land of Canaan, the cattle and the property, and he placed them in 2 parts before Esau and his sons. And he said to Esau, Behold, all this is before you. Choose you unto yourself the half which you will take. And Yaakov said to Esau, Hear you, I pray you, what I will speak unto you, saying, Yahuwah Elohim of heaven and earth spoke unto our fathers Abraham and Yitzchak, saying, Unto your seed will I give this land for an inheritance forever. Now therefore, all that our father have left before you, and behold, all the land is before you. Choose you from them what you desire. If you desire the whole land, take it for yourself and your children forever, and I will take this riches. And if you desire the riches, take it unto you, and I will take this land for me and for my children to inherit forever. And Nebaioth, the son of Ishmael, was then in the land with his children. And Esau went on that day and counseled with him, saying, Thus has Yaakov spoken unto me, and thus has he answered me. Now give your advice, and we will hear. And Nebaioth said, What is this that Yaakov has spoken to you? Behold, all the children of Canaan are dwelling securely in their land, and Yaakov says he will inherit it with his seed all the days. So go now, therefore, and take all your father's riches, and leave Yaakov your brother in the land, as he has spoken. And Esau rose up and returned to Yaakov, and did all that Nebaioth, the son of Ishmael, had advised. And Esau took all the riches that Yitzchak had left, the souls of the beasts, the cattle, and the property, and all the riches. He gave nothing to his brother Yaakov. And Yaakov took all the land of Canaan from the brook of Mizraim unto the river Perath, and he took it for an everlasting possession, and for his children, and for his seed after him forever. Yaakov also took from his brother Esau the cave of Machpelah, which is in Hebron, which Abraham had brought from Ephron for a possession of a burial place for him and his seed forever. And Yaakov wrote all these things in the cipher of purchase, and he signed it, and he testified all this with 4 faithful witnesses. And these are the words which Yaakov wrote in the cipher, saying, The land of Canaan, and all the cities of Kittim, the Shavim, the Yebusim, the Amorim, and the Perizim, and the Girgashim, all the 7 nations from the river of Mizraim and to the river Perath, and the city of Hebron, Kirat, Arba, and the cave which is in it, and the whole did Yaakov buy from his brother Esau for value, for a possession, and for an inheritance for his seed after him forever. And Yaakov took the cipher of purchase, and the signature, the command, and the statutes, and the revealed cipher, and he placed them in an earthen vessel in order that they should remain for a long time, and he delivered them into the hands of his children. Esau took all that his father had left him after his death from his brother Yaakov, and he took all the property from man and beast, camel, ass, ox, and lamb, silver and gold, stone, and bdellium, and all the riches which had belonged to Yitzchak, the son of Abram, there was nothing left with which Esau did not take unto himself from all that Jacob had left after his death. And Esau took all this, and he and his children went home to the land of Seir, and Corey went away from his brother Yaakov and his children, and Esau had possessions among the children of Seir. And Esau returned not to the land of Canaan from that day forward. The whole land of Canaan became an inheritance to the children of Yisrael for an everlasting inheritance, and Esau with all his children inherited the mountain of Seir. In those days after the death of Jacob, Yahweh commanded and caused a famine upon the whole earth. At that time, Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, was sitting upon his throne in the land of Mitzrayim, and lay in his bed and dreamed dreams. And Pharaoh saw in his dream that he was standing by the side of the river of Mitzrayim. And while he was standing, he saw, and behold, 7 flat-fleshed and well-favored kine came up out of the river, and 7 other kine, lean-fleshed and ill-favored, came up after them. And the 7 ill-favored ones swallowed up the well-favored ones. And still their appearance was ill as at first. And he awoke, and he slept again, and he dreamed a second time. And he saw, and behold, 7 ears of grain came up upon one stalk, rank and good, and 7 thin ears blasted with the east wind sprang up after them, and the thin ears swallowed up the full ones. And Pharaoh awoke out of his dream. And in the morning the king remembered his dream, and his ruach was sadly troubled on account of this dream. And the king hastened and sent and called for all the magicians of Mitzrayim and the wise men, and they came and stood before Pharaoh. And the king said to them, I have dreamed dreams, and there is none to interpret them. And they said unto the king, Relate your dreams to your servant, and let us hear them. And the king related his dreams to them, and they all answered and said with one voice to the king, May the king live forever. And this is the interpretation of your dreams. The 7 good kine which you did see denote 7 daughters that will be born unto you in the latter days. And the 7 kine which you saw come up after them and swallowed them up are for a sign that the daughters which will be born unto you will all die in the lifetime of the king. And that which you did see in the second dream of 7 full good ears of grain coming up upon one stalk, this is their interpretation, that you will build unto yourself in the latter days 7 cities throughout the land of Mitzrayim, and which you saw of the 7 blasted ears of grain springing up after them and swallowing them up while you did behold them with your eyes, is a sign that the cities which you will build will all be destroyed in the latter days, in the lifetime of the king. And when they spoke these words, the king did not incline his ear to their words, neither did he fix his heart upon them, for the king knew in his wisdom that they did not give a proper interpretation of the dreams. And when they had finished speaking before the king answered them, saying, What is this thing that you have spoken unto me? Surely you have uttered falsehood and spoken lies. Therefore now, give the proper interpretation of my dreams, that you may not die. And the king commanded after this, and he sent and called again for other wise men, and they came and stood before the king, and the king related his dream to them, and they all answered him according to the first interpretation. And the king's anger was kindled, and he was very wroth. And the king said to them, Surely you speak lies and utter falsehood in what you have said. And the king commanded that a proclamation should be issued throughout the land of Mitzrayim, saying, It is resolved by the king and his great men that any wise man who knows and understands the interpretation of dreams, and I will not come this day before the king, he shall die. And the man that will declare unto the king the proper interpretation of his dreams, there shall be given unto him all that he require from the king. And all the wise men of the land of Mitzrayim came before the king, together with all the magicians and sorcerers that were in Mitzrayim and in Goshen and Ra'amka and Takpanak in Tosar and in all the places on all the borders of Mitzrayim. And they all stood before the king. And all the nobles and all the princes and the attendants belonging to the king came together from all the cities of Mitzrayim. And they all sat before the king, and the king related his dream before the wise men. And the princes and all that sat before the king were astonished at the vision. And all the wise men who were before the king were greatly divided in their interpretation of his dreams. Some of them interpreted them to the king, saying, the 7 good kine are 7 kings, who from the king's issue will be raised over Mitzrayim, and the 7 bad kine are 7 princes, who will stand up against them in the latter days and destroy them. And the 7 ears of grain are the 7 great princes belonging to Mitzrayim, who will fall in the hands of the 7 less powerful princes of their enemies in the wars of our Lord the King. And some of them interpreted to the king in this manner, saying, the 7 good kine are the strong cities of Mitzrayim, and the 7 bad kine are the 7 nations of the land of Canaan, who will come against the 7 cities of Mitzrayim in the latter days and destroy them. And that which you saw in the second dream of 7 good and bad ears of grain is a sign that the government of Mitzrayim will again return to your seed as at first. And in his reign, the people of the city of Mitzrayim will turn against the 7 cities of Canaan, who are stronger than they are, and will destroy them. And the government of Mitzrayim will return to your seed. And some of them said to the king, this is the interpretation of your dreams. The 7 good kine are 7 queens, whom you will take for a woman in the latter days. And the 7 bad kine denote that those women will all die in the lifetime of the king. And the 7 good and bad ears of grain, which you did see in the second dream, are 14 children. And it will be in the latter days that they will stand up and fight amongst themselves, and the 7 of them will smite the 7 that are more powerful. And some of them said these words unto the king, saying, the 7 good kine denote that 7 children will be born to you, and they will slay 7 of your children's children in the latter days. And the 7 good ears of grain, which you did see in the second dream, are those princes against whom 7 other less powerful princes will fight and destroy them in the latter days, and avenge your children's cause. And the government will again return to your seed. And the king heard all the words of the wise men of Mitzrayim and their interpretation of his dreams, and none of them pleased the king. And the king knew in his wisdom that they did not altogether speak correctly in all these words. For this was from Yahuwah to frustrate the words of the wise men in Mitzrayim, in order that Joseph might go forth from the house of confinement, and in order that he should become great in Mitzrayim. And the king saw that none amongst all the wise men and magicians of Mitzrayim spoke correctly to him. And the king's wrath was kindled, and his anger burned within him. And the king commanded that all the wise men and magicians should go out from before him, and that they should all went out from before the king with shame and disgrace. And the king commanded that a proclamation be sent throughout Mitzrayim to slay all the magicians that were in Mitzrayim, and not one of them should be suffered to live. And the captains of the guard belonging to the king rose up, and each man drew his sword, and they began to smite the magicians of Mitzrayim and the wise men. And after this, Merod, the chief butler to the king, came and bowed down before the king and sat before him. And the butler said unto the king, May the king live forever, and his government be exalted in the land. You were angry with your servants in those days, now 2 years past, and did place me in the ward. And I was for some time in the ward, I and the chief of the bakers. And there was with me an every servant belonging to the captain of the guard. His name was Joseph, for his master had been angry with him and placed him in the house of confinement, and he attended us there. And in some time after, when we were in the ward, we dreamed dreams in one night. I and the chief of the bakers, we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And we came in the morning and told them to that his servant, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream did he correctly interpret. And it came to pass as he interpreted to us. So was the event. There fell not to the ground any of his words. And now, therefore, my lord and king, do not slay the people of Mitzrayim for naught. Behold, the slave is still confined in the house by the captain of the guard, his master, in the house of confinement. If it pleases the king, let him send for him, that he may come before you, and he will make known to you the correct interpretation of the dream which you did dream. And the king heard the words of the chief butler, and the king ordered that the wise men of Mitzrayim should not be slain. And the king ordered his servants to bring Joseph before him. And the king said to them, Go unto him, and do not tarry, lest he be confused, and will not know to speak properly. And the servants of the king went to Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and the king's servants shaved him, and he changed his prison garment, and he came before the king. And the king was sitting upon his royal throne in a princely dress girt around with a golden ephod, and the fine gold which was upon it sparkled, and the carbuncle, and the ruby, and the emerald, together with all precious stones that were upon the king's head, dazzled the eye. And Joseph wondered greatly at the king, and the throne upon which the king sat was covered with gold and silver, and with onyx stones, and it had 70 steps. And it was their custom throughout the land of Mitzrayim that every man who came to speak to the king, if he was a prince or one that was estimable in the sight of the king, he ascended to the king's throne as far as 31st step, and the king would descend to the 36th step and speak with him. If he was one of the common people, he ascended to the 3rd step, and the king would descend to the 4th and speak to him. And their custom was, moreover, that any man who understood to speak in all the 70 languages, he ascended the 70 steps and went up and spoke till he reached the kings. And any man who could not complete the 70, he asserted as many steps as the languages which he knew to speak in. And it was customary in those days in Mitzrayim that no one should reign over them, but who understood to speak in the 70 languages. And when Joseph came before the king, he bowed down to the ground before the king, and he ascended to the 3rd step, and the king sat upon the 4th step and spoke with Joseph. And the king said unto Joseph, I dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter to interpret it properly. And I commanded this day that all the magicians of Mitzrayim and the wise men thereof should come before me. And I related my dreams to them, and no one has properly interpreted them to me. And after this, I this day heard concerning you, that you are a wise man, and can correctly interpret every dream that you hear. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, Let Pharaoh relate his dream that he dreamed. Surely the interpretations belong to Elohim. And Pharaoh related his dreams to Joseph, the dream of the kind, and the dream of the ears of grain. And the king left off speaking. And Joseph was then clothed with the Ruach Elohim before the king, and he knew all things that would befall the king from that day forward. And he knew the proper interpretation of the king's dream, and he spoke before the king. And Joseph found favor in the sight of the king. And the king inclined his ears and his heart, and he heard all the words of Joseph. And Joseph said unto the king, Do not imagine that they are two dreams, for it is only one dream. For that which Elohim has chosen to do throughout the land, he has shown to the king in his dream. And this is the proper interpretation of your dream. The 7 good kine and ears of grain are 7 years, and the 7 bad kine and ears of grain are also 7 years. It is one dream. Behold, the 7 years that are coming there will be a great plenty throughout the land, and after that the 7 years of famine will follow them, a very grievous famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten from the land, and the famine will consume the inhabitants of the land. The king dreamed one dream, and the dream was therefore repeated unto Pharaoh, because a thing is established by Elohim, and Elohim will be shortly bringing it to pass. Now therefore, I will give you counsel and deliver your soul and the souls of the inhabitants of the land from the evil of the famine, that you seek throughout your kingdom for a man very discreet and wise, who knows all the affairs of government, and appointed him superintendent over the land of Mitzrayim. And let the man whom you place over Mitzrayim appoint officers under him, that they gather in all the food of the good years that are coming, and let them lay up grain and deposit it in your appointed stores, and let them keep the food for the 7 years of famine, that it may be found for you and your people and your whole land, and that you and your land be not cut off by the famine. Let all the inhabitants of the land be also ordered that they gather in, every man the produce of his field, of all sorts of food during the 7 good years, and that they place it in their stores, that it may be found for them in the days of the famine, and that they may live upon it. This is the proper interpretation of your dream, and this is the counsel given to save your soul and the souls of all your subjects. And the king answered and said to Joseph, Who says and who knows that your words are correct? And he said unto the king, This shall be a sign for you respecting all my words, that they are true, and that my advice is good for you. Behold, your woman sits this day upon the stool of delivery, and she will bear you a son, and you will rejoice with him. When your child shall have gone forth from his mother's womb, your firstborn son that has been born these 2 years back shall die, and you will be comforted in the child that will be born unto you this day. And Joseph finished speaking these words to the king, and he bowed down to the king, and he went out. And when Joseph had gone out from the king's presence, those signs which Joseph had spoken unto the king came to pass on that day. And the queen bore a son on that day, and the king heard the good news about his son, and he rejoiced. And when the reporter had gone forth from the king's presence, the king's servants found the firstborn son of the king fallen dead upon the ground. And there was great lamentation and noise in the king's house, and the king heard it. And he said, What is the noise and lamentation that I have heard in the house? And they told the king that his firstborn son had died. Then the king knew that all Joseph's words that he had spoken were correct, and the king was consoled for his son by the child that was born to him on that day, as Joseph had spoken. After these things, the king sent and assembled all his officers and servants, and all the princes and nobles belonging to the king, and they all came before the king. And the king said unto them, Behold, you have seen and heard all the words of this every man, and all the signs which he declared would come to pass, and not any of his words have fallen unto the ground. You know that he has given a proper interpretation of the dream, and it will surely come to pass now. Therefore, take counsel and know what you will do, and how the land will be delivered from famine. Seek now and see whether the like can be found, in whose heart there is wisdom and knowledge, and I will appoint him over the land. For you have heard what the everyman has advised concerning this, to save the land therewith from the famine. And I know that the land will not be delivered from the famine, but with the advice of the everyman, him that advised me. And they all answered the king and said, The counsel which the every has given concerning this is good. Now therefore, our Lord and King, behold, the whole land is in your hands. Do that which seems good in your sight. Him whom you choose, and whom you in your wisdom know to be wise and capable of delivering the land with his wisdom, him shall the king appoint to be under him over the land. And the king said to all the officers, I have thought that since Elohim has made known to the everyman all that he has spoken, there is none so discreet and wise in the whole land as he is. If it seems good in your sight, I will place him over the land, for he will save the land with his wisdom. And all the officers answered the king and said, But surely it is written in the laws of Mitzrayim, and it should not be violated, that no man shall reign over Mitzrayim, nor be the second to the king, but the one who has knowledge in all the languages of the sons of men. Now, therefore, our king, our Lord and King, behold, this every man can only speak the Everett language. And now then, can he be over us, the second under government, a man who not even knows our language? Now we pray you, send for him, and let him come before you, and prove him in all things, and do as you see fit. And the king said, It shall be done tomorrow. And the things that you have spoken is good. And all the officers came on that day before the king. And on that night Yahuwah sent one of his ministering angels, and he came unto the land of Mitzrayim, unto Joseph. And the angel of Yahuwah stood over Joseph. And behold, Joseph was lying in bed at night in his master's house in the dungeon, for his master had put him back into the dungeon on account of his woman. And the angel roused him from his sleep, and Joseph rose up and stood upon his legs. And behold, the angel of Yahuwah was standing opposite to him. And the angel of Yahuwah spoke with Joseph, and he taught him all the languages of man in that night. And he called his name Yahuseph. And the angel of Yahuwah went from him, and Joseph returned and lay upon his bed. And Joseph was astonished at the vision which he saw. And it came to pass in the morning that the king sent for all his officers and servants, and they all came and sat before the king. And the king ordered Joseph to be brought. And the king's servants went and brought Joseph before Pharaoh. And the king came forth and ascended the steps of the throne. And Joseph spoke unto the king in all languages. And Joseph went up to him and spoke unto the king until he arrived before the king in the 70th step. And he sat before the king. And the king greatly rejoiced on account of Joseph. And all the king's officers rejoiced greatly with the king when they heard all the words of Joseph. And the thing seemed good in the sight of the king and the officers. to appoint Joseph to be the second to the king over the whole land of Mitzrayim. And the king spoke unto Joseph, saying, Now you did give me counsel to appoint a wise man over the land of Mitzrayim, in order with his wisdom to save the land from famine. Now therefore, since Elohim has made all this known unto you, and all the words which you have spoken, there is not throughout the land a wise man like unto you, and your name no more shall be called Joseph, but Tesaphaнаth Ha Chanak shall your name be. You shall be second to me, and according to your word shall be all the affairs of my government. And at your word shall my people go out and come in. Also from under your hand shall my servants and officers receive their salary, which is given to them monthly. And you shall all the people of the land bow down. Only in my throne will I be greater than you. And the king took off his ring from his hand and put it upon the hand of Joseph. And the king dressed Joseph in a princely garment, and he put a golden crown upon his head, and he put a golden chain upon his neck. And the king commanded his servants, and they made him ride in the second chariot belonging to the king that went opposite to the king's chariot. And he caused him to ride upon a great and strong horse from the king's horses, and to be conducted through the streets of the land of Misraim. And the king commanded that all those that played upon timbrels, harps, and other musical instruments should go forth with Joseph, 1,000 timbrels, 1,000 mecholoth, and 1,000 nebelim went after him, and 5,000 men with drawn swords glittering in their hands, and they went marching and playing before Joseph. And 20,000 of great men of the king, girt with belts of skin covered with gold, marched at the right hand of Joseph, and 20,000 at his left. And all the women and damsels went upon the roofs or stood in the streets, playing and rejoicing at Joseph, and gazed at the appearance of Joseph and at his beauty. And the king's people went before him and behind him, perfuming the road with frankincense, with cassia, and with all sorts of fine perfume, and scattered myrrh and aloes along the road. And 20 men proclaimed these words before him throughout the land in a loud voice. Do you see this man whom the king has chosen to be his second? All the affairs of the government shall be regulated by him, and he that transgresses his orders, or that does not bow down before him to the ground, shall die, for he rebels against the king and his second. And when the heralds had ceased proclaiming, all the people of Mitzrayim bowed down to the ground before Joseph and said, May the king live, also may his second live. And all the inhabitants of Mitzrayim bowed down along the road. And when the heralds approached them, they bowed down. And they rejoiced with all sorts of timbrels, mechol, and nabal before Joseph. And Joseph upon his horse lifted up his eyes to heaven and called out and said, He raises the poor man from the dust. He lifts up the needy from the dunghill. O Yahuwah Tesavaoth, happy is the man who trusts in you. And Joseph passed throughout the land of Mitzrayim with Pharaoh's servants and officers. And they showed him the whole land of Mitzrayim and all the king's treasures. And Joseph returned and came on that day before Pharaoh, and the king gave unto Joseph a possession in the land of Mitzrayim, a possession of fields and vineyards. And the king gave unto Joseph 3,000 talents of silver and 1,000 talents of gold, and onyx stones and bdellium and many gifts. And on that day the king commanded all the people of Mitzrayim to bring unto Joseph offerings and gifts, and that he that violated the command of the king should die. And they made a high place in the street of the city, and they spread out garments there. And whoever brought anything to Joseph put it unto the high place. And all the people of Mitzrayim cast something into the high place, one man a golden earring, and the other rings and earrings, and different vessels of gold and silver work, and onyx stones, and bdellium did he cast upon the high place. Everyone gave something of what he possessed. And Joseph took all these and placed them in his treasuries. And all of the officers and nobles belonging to the king exalted Joseph, and they gave him many gifts, seeing that the king had chosen him to be his second. And the king sent to Potipharah, the son of Achiram, priest of On, and he took his younger daughter, Asenath, and gave her unto Joseph for a woman. And the damsel was very comely, a virgin, one whom man had not known. And Joseph took her for a woman. And the king said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and beside you none shall dare to lift up his hand or foot to regulate my people throughout the land of Mitzrayim. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh. And Joseph went out from before the king, and he became the king's second in Mitzrayim. And the king gave Joseph 100 servants to attend him in his house. And Joseph also sent and purchased many servants, and they remained in the house of Joseph. Joseph then built for himself a very magnificent house, like unto the house of kings, before the court of the king's palace. And he made in the house a large temple, very elegant in appearance, and covenant for his residence. 3 years was Joseph in erecting his house. And Joseph made unto himself a very elegant throne of abundance of gold and silver, and he covered it with onyx stones and bdellium, and he made upon it the likeness of the whole land of Mitzrayim, and the likeness of the river of Mitzrayim, and the waters, the whole land of Mitzrayim. And Joseph sat securely upon the throne in his house, and Yahuwah increased Joseph's wisdom. And all the inhabitants of Mitzrayim and Pharaoh's servants and his princes loved Joseph exceedingly, for this thing was from Yahweh to Joseph. And Joseph had an army that made war, going out in hosts and troops, to the number of 40,600 men capable of bearing arms, to assist the king and Joseph against the enemy, besides the king's officers and his servants and inhabitants of Mitzrayim without number. And Joseph gave unto his mighty men and to all his host shields and javelins and caps and coats of mail and stones for slinging. At that time, the children of Tarshish came against the sons of Ishmael and made war with them. And the children of Tarshish spoiled the Yishaelim for a long time. And the children of Ishmael were small in number in those days, and they could not prevail over the children of Tarshish, and they were sorely oppressed. And the old men of Ishmaelim sent a record to the king of Mitzrayim, saying, Send, I pray you, unto your servant officers and hosts to help us fight against the children of Tarshish. For we have been consuming away for a long time. And Pharaoh sent Joseph with the mighty men and hosts which were with him, and also his mighty men from the king's house. And they went to the land of Cavialah, to the children of Ishmael, to assist them against the children of Tarshish. And the children of Ishmael fought with the children of Tarshish, and Joseph smote the Tarshishium, and he subdued all their land, and the children of Ishmael dwell therein to this day. And when the land of Tarshish was subdued, all the Tarshishium ran away, and came on the border of their brethren, the children of Yavan, and Joseph, with all his mighty men and host, returned to Mizraim, not one man of them missing. And at the revolution of the year, in the 2nd year of Joseph's reigning over Mizraim, Yahuwah gave great plenty throughout the land for 70 years, as Joseph had spoken For Yahweh blessed all the produce of the earth in those days for 7 years, and they ate and were greatly satisfied. And Joseph at that time had officers under him, and they collated all the food of the good years and heaped grain year by year, and they placed it in the treasuries of Joseph. And at any time when they gathered the food, Joseph commanded that they should bring the grain in the ears, and also bring with it some of the soil of the field, that it should not spoil. And Joseph did according to this year by year, and he heaped up grain like the sands of the sea for abundance, for his stores were immense and could not be numbered for abundance. And also all the inhabitants of Mitzrayim gathered all sorts of food in their stores in great abundance during the 7 good years, but they did not do unto it as Joseph did. And all the food which Joseph and the Mitzrayim had gathered during the 7 years of plenty was secured for the land in stores for the 7 years of famine, for the support of the whole land. And the inhabitants of Mitzrayim filled each man his stores and his concealed place with grain, to be support during the famine. And Joseph placed all the food that he had gathered in all the cities of Mitzrayim, and he closed all the stores and placed sentinels over them. And Joseph's woman, Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, bore unto him sons, Manasseh, Ephraim. Joseph was 34 years old when he begat them. And the lads grew up, and they went in his ways and in his instructions. They did not deviate from the way which their father taught them, neither to the right or left. And Yahweh was with the lads, and they grew up and had understanding and skill in all wisdom and in all the affairs of government. And all the king's officers and all the great men of the inhabitants of Mitzrayim exalted the lads, and they were brought up all amongst the king's children. And the 7 years of plenty that were throughout the land were an end. And the 7 years of famine came after them, as Joseph had spoken, and the famine was throughout the land. And all the people of Mitzrayim saw that the famine had commenced in the land of Mitzrayim. And all the people of Mitzrayim opened their stores of grain, for the famine prevailed over them. And they found all the food that was in their stores full of vermin and not fit to eat. And the famine prevailed throughout the land. And all the inhabitants of Mitzrayim came and cried before Pharaoh, for the famine was heavy upon them. And they said unto Pharaoh, give food unto your servants. And wherefore shall we die through hunger before your eyes, even we and our little ones? And Pharaoh answered them, saying, and wherefore do you cry unto me? Did not Joseph command that the grain should be laid up during the 7 years of plenty for the years of famine? And wherefore did you not hearken to his voice? And the people of Mitzrayim answered the king, saying, as your soul lives, our lord, your servants have done all that Joseph ordered. For your servants also gathered in all the produce of their fields during the 7 years of plenty, and laid it in the stores unto this day. And when the famine prevailed over your servants, we opened our stores, and behold, our produce was filled with vermin, and was not fit for food. And when the king heard all that had befallen the inhabitants of Mitzrayim, the king was greatly afraid on account of the famine, and he was much terrified. And the king answered the people of Mitzrayim, saying, since all this has happened unto you, go unto Joseph, do whatsoever he shall say for you to do. Transgress not his commandments. And all the people of Mitzrayim went forth and came unto Joseph. And he said unto them, give unto us food. Wherefore shall we die before you through hunger? For we gathered in our produce during the 7 years as you did command, and we put it in store, and thus has it befallen us? And when Joseph heard all the words of the people of Mitzrayim, and what had befallen them, Joseph opened up all the stores of the produce, and he sold it unto the people of Mitzrayim. And the famine prevailed throughout the land, and the famine was in all countries, but in the land of Mitzrayim there was produce for sale. And all the inhabitants of Mitzrayim came unto Joseph to buy grain, for the famine prevailed over them. And all their grain was spoiled, and Joseph daily sold it to all the people of Mitzrayim. And all the inhabitants of the land of Canaan, and the Philistine, and those beyond the Jordan, and the children of the east, and all the cities of the lands far and nigh, heard that their grain was in Mitzrayim. And they all came to Mitzrayim to buy grain, for the famine prevailed over them. And Joseph opened the stores of grain and placed officers over them. And they daily stood and sold to all that came. And Joseph knew that his brethren also would come to Mitzrayim to buy grain, for the famine prevailed throughout the earth. And Joseph commanded all his people that they should cause it to be proclaimed throughout the land of Mitzrayim, saying, It is the pleasure of the king, of his second, and of their great men, that any person who wishes to buy grain in Mitzrayim shall not send his servants to Mitzrayim to purchase, but his sons, and also Mitzri or Kenaani, who shall come from any of the stores from buying grain in Mitzrayim, and shall go and sell it throughout the land. He shall die, for no one shall buy but for the support of his household. And any man leading 2 or 3 beasts shall die, for a man shall only lead his own beast. And Joseph placed sentinels at the gate of Mitzrayim, and commanded them, saying, Any person who may come to buy grain, suffer him not to enter until his name, and the name of his father, and the name of his father's father be written down. And whatsoever is written by day, send their names unto me in the evening, that I may know their names. And Joseph placed officers throughout the land of Mitzrayim, and he commanded them to do all these things. And Joseph did all these things, and made these statutes in order that he might know when his brethren should come to Mitzrayim to buy grain. And Joseph's people caused it daily to be proclaimed in Mitzrayim, according to these words and statutes which Joseph had commanded. And all the inhabitants of the east and west country, and all the earth, heard of the statutes and regulations which Joseph had enacted in Mitzrayim. And the inhabitants of the extreme parts of the earth came and bought grain in Mitzrayim day after day, and then went away. And all the officers of Mitzrayim did as Joseph had commanded, and all that came to Mitzrayim to buy grain, the gatekeepers would write their names and their fathers' names, and daily bring them in the evening before Joseph.